Hello everyone, it's Shannon here. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, we're going to create this fun interactive card featuring Hero Art's May My Monthly Hero Kit. I'll also be sharing a fun paper piecing technique that combines Copic markers to add lots of texture and depth to this really fun kitchen scene. We're going to start today's card with an A2 top folding white card base made out of some heavyweight white cardstock. The first thing I'm going to do is actually stamp my background, that beautiful tiled background. I have this awesome MISTI sticky mat here. I'm going to place this into my MISTI. I did remove the mouse pad because this background stamp is a rubber cling stamp, so it has that extra thickness. So I just centered my card base in my MISTI and on that sticky mat, and I'm just going to place the stamp over that card front, and then I'll be ready to ink it up. I'm going to use a very light color. This is Soft Vanilla Shadow Ink from Hero Arts. I just want a subtle background just to add a little bit of texture because the main focus of this card is going to be all the awesome die cuts that are in the May kit. So now I have two pieces of cardstock. One is sand and one is Pebble from Hero Arts. I'm going to start with the sand here, which is kind of like a craft color, and die cut just the lower half of the kitchen out of this sand cardstock. And both these panels were A2 card bases. So now I just trimmed off the excess, and now I'm going to continue to kind of trim off some pieces here. Basically what I want to be left with is just that bottom half of the kitchen, so the cabinets and the oven and that bowl of fruit. Now I have some pieces of low tack tape. This is actually Micropore tape, and I'm adding it to the back side of my little kitchen here, my little cabinets. You may have noticed that some of my handles were kind of stuck inside my die, so I'm just using that little bit of adhesive from the tape to kind of pop those or inlay those little handles back in. So now my cabinets are complete. So now we're going to move on to actually Copic coloring. So I'm going to start with a really light brown here, and I'm actually going to Copic color directly on top of this colored cardstock. The colored cardstock is going to kind of provide a base, and I just feel like I get a nicer, smoother look, and I use less ink this way. So it's a really great way to kind of think about when you Copic color, not always starting with a white card base. So I added that light brown. Now I'm moving on to my medium shade brown and just really being streaky here with my coloring, because my goal here is to mimic the look of wood grain. And I'm continuing to add some fine lines, and now I'm moving on to my darkest shade and adding really fine lines, as fine as I can get with the Copic brush tip, to again add texture and really make this look like wood grain. Now I'm going back over with my lightest shade to kind of smooth it out a little bit, soften it a little bit, and now I'm back with my medium shade and adding some shadows around the actual drawers in the cabinet here and even the little handles, just to again make these drawers kind of pop from that background and look actually like they're three-dimensional. Now I'm going to move on to black here and just quickly color the front of my oven. This is so when you open the oven, it looks black inside. Now I went and die cut out of the Pebble cardstock, which is a really light gray cardstock, a kitchen, or my lower half of the kitchen again. Here, the only part of this kitchen I want is the oven. So I'm just going to cut out that oven here, remove the rest, and now I'm going to Copic color this with some light grays to add some shape or dimension to this kitchen, or to this oven as well. Started with the light gray, then moved on to a medium, using the medium shade to also kind of highlight some details that the die cuts itself. Then after I kind of added some shadowing to, or some shading to the oven, I'm going to color the burners real quick here, and then I will, then I'm basically ready to glue this down. Now when you glue this down, you want to be careful not to add any glue to the actual oven door, because I want that to open still. But you do want to add a little bit of glue to the very bottom of the oven door, kind of like the hinge part so that way it's connected on all four sides to the sand oven underneath. So after I let that set up a little bit, I'm going to take and the glue has dried, I'm going to take my bone folder here and just kind of really crease the fold or the score line that the die makes, so that my little oven door opens smoothly. I went ahead and cut a little strip of cardstock out of the Pebble cardstock, so it's the same gray as the oven. Just added some adhesive to it, and I'm just going to pop it inside that oven door so it looks like we have a little oven rack here inside our oven. Now we're going to move on to the turkey. So I die cut the turkey out of sand cardstock, which is kind of like a craft cardstock, and some Dove White cardstock. Now I'm going to remove the turkey from the platter, but only use the white platter and color that with a little bit of light blue to add some shadow. And then I'm ready to color my sand turkey, starting with similar colors that I used for the cabinets. E33 as a base, then E31 as a base, then E35, and then onto E29. Just kind of creating some shadows here or some gradations here so that the turkey really pops and has some dimension. So once I finish coloring the turkey, I'm ready to kind of adhere this in, starting with the platter. Just going to glue it right down into my oven, and then the turkey on top. And now we have our little oven all done with that fun little reveal of the turkey inside. So now we're going to move on to that bowl of fruit. So I die cut that fruit bowl out of white cardstock and cherry red cardstock. On the white cardstock, I'm just quickly coloring some shadows with some light blue to the bowl to give it some shape. Now I'm going to color these red apples in with several reds, again to kind of create some depth and gradation so these apples really pop and have some shape. Once I finish coloring these apples, we will actually glue this on top of the the sand bowl of apples that is attached to the cabinets. I'm just trimming down the apples a little bit more so I just have them. I had a little bit of a bowl still part of the apple, so I trimmed that off. Glued those red apples to the white bowl and then glued the bowl on to that sand bowl. Now we're moving on to some other shapes that I die cut. This little stovetop espresso maker I die cut out of Pebble cardstock, that gray, and now I'm just coloring with some Copics to add some shape. And once I finish coloring that little stovetop espresso maker out, I'm going to grab my scissors and cut it. And this little espresso guy is part of the shelving units on the upper half of the large fancy die in this set. Now moving on to a little jar here, also resting on one of the shelves. I die cut out of white cardstock, and now I'm just going to quickly color this with my Copics, kind of making this look like a jar full of marmalade, I guess, because I'm coloring it orange. I did leave a little white space on the front of the jar so it looked like it had a label, and then colored the top of the jar with a couple grays to make it look like it has a lid on top. After I finish coloring that little jar out with Copics, I'm going to fussy cut it out to remove it away from the shelf. And then we'll have two little pieces or two little parts of things to sit on our shelf done. Now I also have this little, I think this is a little sugar jar. At least that's how I'm going to color it. I colored it with a couple blue or a light blue, just a single light blue to add some shadow because I'm thinking it's basically white. And then used a gray to color the little spoon that's kind of sitting inside. Again, I'll fussy cut it out to remove it from the rest of the shelf. Now these 4 pots, it's actually just 2 dies, one die for the large pot and one die for the smaller pot. These are standalone dies, so you don't need so you won't find these in the full panel die. These are just the standalone dies. So I cut these out of color cardstock. The green is Meadow, the yellow mustard, the orange papaya, and the red cherry. So I just grabbed some Copic markers, 2 a light and a medium, and I'm just coloring a little gradation at the bottom of each of the pots and using a brown to color in the handles a little bit. My goal here is to make these look kind of like retro, kind of, or even cast iron looking cookware. And I think they really want the kitchen have a nice fun look. And so now that those are colored, I actually off camera colored a little strip of sand cardstock in the same manner that we colored the cabinet, so it looks kind of like wood. And I trimmed it down to about 3 1/4 by 1/4. And then I also trimmed down another strip of sand cardstock. Now this is just plain sand cardstock. I didn't color on it. And it's 4 1/4 by 1/4. And I'm just going to glue it down to the very bottom of my card front here. This is going to ground my whole scene and actually be just kind of the floor for the kitchen. Now I'm going to add some glue to the backside of my cabinets and then stick this down onto my card front. After I've glued that down, I'm ready to move on to some of the little accents or first the shelf. So I'm going to add some glue to my little shelf here and stick that down. I'm going to center it right on my card front. And then we're ready to kind of fill our shelves and the top of our cabinets. Starting with a little bottle here that I colored just in the same manner that I colored the green pots, just used a medium and a light shade of Copics to add some shadows. Now our little jar of marmalade. Now I'm ready to start gluing down some of those pots. Going to glue the orange one right down onto the top of the stove. Then we'll move on to our larger pots. Those are going to go on top of that shelf. And then we'll finish up with the last little pot. And of course, we have the espresso maker and the little sugar jar. So just going to glue those all to that upper shelf. The colors really kind of balance this whole little scene out by using kind of the same colors around the scene. And I do think this just has a fun, really warm, homey kitchen kind of vibe. Finishing up with that last little jar of sugar. So now that all my die cuts are glued down, basically my whole kitchen scene is done. The last thing I'm going to do is stamp my sentiment. This is the sentiment is of course from the May My Monthly Hero kit. Just stamped it in intensified black ink from Hero Arts, and that will actually complete the whole scene. I'll hold it to the camera here so you get a good look at that fun oven opening door, which reveals that really cool turkey. And I think the scene is really nice and bright and vibrant thanks to using that colored cardstock, but still has lots of dimension because we colored those die cuts with our Copics, so we have lots of shape. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If any questions about the products I used, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.